This week on The Big Show, we'll be interviewing Benedict Reuschling of the FreeBSD Docs team, and he has a special surprise in store for Allan. So stay tuned. As always, we have answers to your questions and all the latest news today on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 41, recorded June 11th, 2014. Hey, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Allan Jude.
Glad to have you guys with us this week. Another exciting week. Lots of new stuff as we're trying out new gear to record this show. But of course, we have all your headlines coming right up. So let's just move right into it. First up, FreeBSD moves to Bug. Big one. I think, how long have we been talking about this, Allan?
Yeah.
I know it's come up at a lot of conferences.
Yes. The plan of getting NATS has been on the way out for about 17 years now.
Yeah, right? I think this has come up at every conference I've been at, but it finally happened.
Yeah, at BSD Can, it was decided this had to happen like immediately. Like it was almost ready, and that they had a working version of Bugzilla running, but it was missing like the last week of bugs, so they just had to rerun the import. And then when they did, they found some more problems. But anyway, over the course of a weekend, 2 weekends ago, I guess, they managed to get it all running, and now the FreeBSD bug tracker is Bugzilla. And the number of bugs getting closed has gone up very sharply because of that.
Mm-hmm. I'll have to look. I don't even think we have the link in the show notes, but it's just bugs.freebsd.org now, right? Or is it Bugzilla?
No, it's bugs.freebsd.org. It's the same.
Yeah.
And all the PR numbers stayed the same. So if you had an existing PR in NATS, it has the exact same number, and all the information is in Bugzilla. And they're changing the format of the URL slightly so that it will be the same forever no matter what. So it's like bugs.freebsd.org/the number. And that will always point you to that bug, so that, you know, if they move on from Bugzilla to something else in 5 years, the URLs will still work.
Those they don't go away.
Yeah, they've done the same thing for the SVN web interface. You know, there's the change set URLs are always the same, even if we change the underlying software. We'll just add the redirects, and that's cool. Yeah, that way, you know, basically it provides a permanent link, even if our software might change in the future. Well,
you don't lose your indexing too. Search engines index those, and that's a good way to do things, future-proofing it. So we also have a link to a cool new workflow chart that they've put up, which shows how things are going to be done now using Bugzilla, and you may want to take a gander at that if you're either submitting bugs or a developer. Just good to know how this all works out.
They're working on a couple of different things, but mostly more categories or more states that the bug is in. Like first, it comes in from the user, and it goes into the needs triage state, which then the user or someone from the project will classify it in the right spot or whatever, and then it needs help. Right, somebody has to fix the problem the person's reporting, and then when that happens, then it's, you know, waiting for commit or waiting for approval. You know, if it's a port, you know, the maintainer has to approve it. And it depends who wrote the code. You know, if the user submitted a patch and the patch has been tested and it's good to go, then it just needs someone to commit it. And then once that's done, it moves into, you know, it needs to be merged, right? So the code went into head, but it's not in, you know, 9.2 yet or 9.3. So then it gets merged, and then it gets marked as fixed. And then when the user confirms that the fix works for them, it goes to loop closed, and the bug is finally finished.
That's finished. Yep.
Yeah. So it'll provide a lot more feedback, and hopefully should result in a lot fewer bugs getting just left with no response. And they're working on a bunch of automated tools to, you know, keep nagging people to
check your bugs, fix this patch, or, you know, commit these things, etc.
And kind of like automatic dealing with specifically for the ports PRs. You know, someone makes a patch and the maintainer has to approve it, but if they don't do that within 2 weeks, then there's a timeout, and that patch can go ahead anyway.
Cool.
And so, you know, automating that system so that you don't end up with somebody submitted a patch and it's been 3 months and nobody's answered, and
nobody's touched it.
It's not on the first page of bugs anymore, so nobody looks at it.
Yeah, I've seen some MFC emails go out too, saying, "Okay, you've committed this, but this still needs to be MFC."
Yeah, I got my first one of those yesterday.
Yep. Cool. Well, this is a welcome change. I'm
Yes.
glad they finally made the switch, and
Yes.
it's a long time coming, but it's worth it. Just and for users' sake, most people are more familiar with Bugzilla than Nats at this point, anyway.
So big thanks to the Bugmeister team, the
Mhm.
cluster admin team, Peyton Adler, and everybody else that Peter Wem that put all the work into making this actually happen and get it going.
Cool. Awesome. Okay, well, next up, we got a cool article this week about do-it-yourself NAS, Econo NAS 2014. And it's a really cool article detailed about building a free NAS box on your own,
Yep.
what kind of hardware you use, and of course, his running total of costs. Let's see. Trying to think. This new one was $50 more than the version he built last year, which was $505. But this new system is quite a bit more powerful.
Mhm.
But pretty in depth. It's going to go over, of course, what he talked a little bit about last year, what he updated this year. It's mostly a hardware focused article. He's going to be detailing the parts he's using for a budget NAS and low power consumption, motherboard and CPU, etc. So he had set the goal of $500. He went over it by about $50 for all the parts, which is not too shabby. That's it's pretty small. But of course, lots of nice pictures of the hardware and step-by-step instructions for assembly, as well as software configuration instructions for once you start configuring FreeNAS.
Yep, and you can actually see all the graphs of FreeNAS and stuff happening.
Mm-hmm.
And his conclusions, and there's actually a contest. He's giving away the hardware now.
Oh, really? Yeah. Okay. Well, that's cool. So where you do register to, let's see here, by following him on Facebook, Twitter, or Google Plus, and resharing or more any of his 3 shares, get you an entry for each of your reshares. Anyone can get up to 3 total entries by following or sharing on each social network. Please visit his FreeNAS giveaway page for all the nitty-gritty details. Yeah. But that's kind of cool.
Yes.
So enter to win your own mini FreeNAS.
But yeah, people ask us all the time, which piece of hardware should I use? And, I don't want to waste a lot of power and stuff. And so this actually kind of walks through not just here's some recommended parts, but also, here's why I picked this part.
It's different than just picking up the old system you had sitting in the closet and putting FreeNAS on it. He actually set out to build a FreeNAS box.
As cheaply as possible as well.
Yeah, as cheaply as possible, getting the most bang for your buck. So good article. Yeah, I highly recommend you read it if you're interested in building any kind of NAS box on your own. Cool. Yep. Okay, well, next up, we have some Dragonfly BSD news this week. Yes. 3.8 has been released.
Actually, 3.8.1 has also been released with the fixes for the OpenSSL patches, because those came out just after they had frozen for the release, so they have point release coming out real quick to deal with the OpenSSL flaw.
Cool. All right, so just a couple interesting notes. The first one I want to mention, though, is at the end of the changelog, they mentioned this is going to be their last 32-bit release, which is interesting. I'm seeing more and more projects do this now, I guess, dropping 32-bit support. But they also talk about binaries, and bin and sbin are dynamic now, enabling the use of PAM and NSS to manage your user accounts.
Dynamically link against those libraries, so yeah. And
interesting.
They also have a new HammerFS backup script, and they've imported a lot of FreeBSD tools synced up to the latest version, so that they have all the greatness that FreeBSD has come up with over the last while as well.
Well, it looks like they also got the new USB 4 BSD as the default in Dragonfly, so they got a USB 3 support for some devices now, so that's pretty cool. And in addition to working on getting their video drivers updated, they've ported over some of the i915 Intel drivers from FreeBSD, and they're working on support still for Haswell and Valley View Bay Trail processors.
Right, because that's not actually in FreeBSD yet either. But they have support for up to the HD 4000 on the Ivy Bridge series, which is what FreeBSD has, so they have all that as well.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, so definitely interesting stuff to see HammerFS moving forward, and they're also now using the FreeBSD package system with their D ports, and they have a couple of maintainers for their system that are in the FreeBSD ports channel all the time, doing a lot of good work.
Very cool.
Some of the improvements are actually just helping the FreeBSD port tree in general, and also just making it a little more operating system agnostic. So when it checks what version of the kernel you're using, it also checks which operating system you're on. Because obviously, if it sees a 3.8 kernel, it's going to think you're running really old FreeBSD. When actually you're running Dragonfly. And so, that also opens up the possibility of other BSD operating systems being able to use the ports tree. It'd be interesting someday maybe to see something like NetBSD using the FreeBSD ports tree, although their package source has what they're after of support for all the different platforms. But if you were using NetBSD on, i286 or AMD64, the bigger set of packages you get from the FreeBSD package system might actually be, something you would be after.
Cool. Yes. So, of course, we'll have all the links in the show notes, so you can check out the release notes for some of the nitty-gritty details, or go ahead and download it. And, of course, there's instructions there for doing source-based upgrades.
Cool.
So next up, OpenZFS European Conference 2014. I guess this was held in Europe recently.
Yeah,
now we have a ton of videos for you to watch.
It was just after BSDCan. And yes, they have all the videos up and slides for almost all of them as well. And lots of interesting stuff.
I want to say some of the topics, of course, Matt Aaron's giving an introduction, so that ought to be interesting to watch. Michael Alexander doing FHGFS performance on ZFS. Andy Gapon from the FreeBSD project doing testing ZFS on FreeBSD. Luke Marsden, hybrid cluster. We've interviewed them in the past. ZFS in the cloud. And gosh, a whole bunch more, another 9 or 10 of them. Any other ones you want to mention here, Allan?
The guys from DDR Drive, which they make a PCI Express card that's just filled with a battery and RAM, and use that as a ZIL device. They have their random write revelations talk, which I'm interested to see what they've learned and how that might apply even if you don't have a DDR drive. Then Grenville Whalen has a high availability talk, which obviously everybody's interested in that. There's a bunch of other companies gave talks about their stuff, like Storient and OpenZFS, Aristore, Cineto, and then actually Luke Marsden had another hybrid cluster talk, just talking about their interaction with OpenZFS.
Well, even Matt Aarons did that with Delphix as well. So it looks like how these companies use ZFS in their environment.
And kind of just designed to share that information between the companies that are using OpenZFS. And it's like, well, this is how we managed to use it and how we overcame certain problems, and share that knowledge so that everybody else can have it as well.
Oh, very cool. So, of course, you'll have to hit up the link there for slides and other goodies related to that conference, but definitely looks interesting if you're a ZFS consumer at all. You may want to go check out some of these. Maybe you'll learn something that you can use in your organization.
And just a reminder that the OpenZFS Developer Summit for 2014 will be sometime in November in San Francisco. They purposely decided not to be the same week as another conference this time. That caused them,
that is helpful.
It was during supercomputing or something last year, and it caused some conflicts for people. Yes, I'm looking forward to. They announced the date for that. I'm just not sure when it was. I forget now.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
He told, it's in the slides from BSDCan. If you look at Matt Aaron's slides for that.
Cool. Okay. Well, we want to mention our sponsor this week, since we're at that time, Tarsnap, of course. Since we're talking about.
If you have lots of ZFS data on your ZFS pool, you need to back it up.
It's got to go somewhere, right?
And you probably want it encrypted before it goes there. So Tarsnap is the best way to do that. And
I want to mention too, it doesn't have to be a lot of data. I mean, Tarsnap's build based on the actual usage. So if you're only storing a small amount of data, maybe some sensitive stuff, I mean, $5 may last you years.
Exactly.
That's all you're doing.
I think Colin said a good chunk of his users use very little. They're paying less than $5 a month, and they're backing up their home directory and some source code or whatever. All their important files, but they're not they're
not backing up their OS.
And if you don't need to. You don't necessarily. It's just it's a great way to back it up because it's doing a differential backup with the Tarsnap dedupe thing. It means that you're not backing up data that didn't change, and it's actually. Colin described the algorithm at EuroBSDCon last year. It was really interesting how it finds the biggest possible chunk of change instead of using a fixed block size where one. Changing one word could actually change the block on either side. It finds the right size chunk to find the diff. And because of that, it does great things. And it means that, if you're on the road, you can still back up on, the Wi-Fi at the hotel or whatever, and it's not going to kill you. that's really important because you probably did a lot of work on the plane and you want to back that up immediately.
That is true. That is true. And sometimes it's something critical. It's been nagging you forever.
Yes.
Oh, now I can't commit this, or I need to store this somewhere in case I drop my laptop at the conference.
Yeah, exactly. You get coffee spilled on it, or I forget it somewhere, or whatever. And that's Tarsnap's the best way to go.
Cool. So that URL is tarsnap.com/BSD Now. We highly suggest you go hit that up because, again, there's two types of people out there, those who've lost data and those who are going to.
Yes.
So don't be one of the people who are going to lose data. Get out there and get signed up with Tarsnap. Protect your most sensitive data.
Yes. Another way to say that is there are two types of people in the world. Those who use Tarsnap and those who wish they had used Tarsnap.
Right? That works. Well, cool. We'll be back in just a moment with our interview with Benedict Reuschling, talking about docs, commit access, Unix education, and, of course, some various topics. So stick around.
So we're here with Benedict Reuschling at the FreeBSD project. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Or me,
for having me.
Whatever. Chris couldn't be here because of airplane problems and reasons and so on. But so, Benedict, how did you first get started with BSD?
I get started with FreeBSD during my internship at a company while I was studying. Previously, I had experience with, so I came from the Linux pathway, so I had used Debian for a long time, and then I discovered a live CD called FreeBSD, it's called. And then I was trying this out, and I was like, wow, the VTY switching is pretty fast. It's faster than my Linux box. So I got interested in this BSD system, and I was finding quickly the FreeBSD website and the handbook, and I was reading, and I was like, wow, this is really great because I have all the documentation in the same space. Then I did an install on my home system, so I had a parallel install with Debian and FreeBSD, so I could switch over if it wouldn't work out. And after a few months or weeks, even I thought, oh, I haven't started this Debian system in a while. Maybe I could go completely on FreeBSD. That's what I did, and that's basically how I started. But it wasn't until I came to the phase where I had to write my master thesis. So by that time, I was actually mostly passively reading the mailing lists and the commit logs. So I was actually knowledgeable who is working in which area, but I never thought about contributing anything back to the project myself. So while I was doing my master thesis, it was a kind of a long and prolonged experience, 6 months writing boring academic stuff. And one day I read a blog post about the FreeBSD German documentation project needing help or new fresh blood to get them more work done. And I was like, oh, okay, I could do that. I'm a German guy. I can write some documentation. And so I was writing back to the one who wrote the blog post and said, hey, I can help. And by the time I thought, oh, okay, there were like maybe 6 people or so I can fill in pretty quickly. And he was writing me back and said, oh, you're the first and only person who actually responded to this blog post. And I was writing back and said, oh, how many people are there? And he was like, yeah, I'm the only one, but I'm happy that you want to join us. And that's how I got started. So he became my mentor. It's Johann Keuss from Austria. And he was basically showing me all the things that are required to edit the documents and make changes and commit them properly to the documentation tree. And then I got my full commit bit a few months later. So that was really great experience getting into the community of the FreeBSD people and actually helping out with the stuff that I can help out with. So that's my pathway.
Right. So what do you do mostly for the FreeBSD project now?
At the moment, I'm doing 2 things. I'm mostly helping out or trying to help out with the backlog of the actual translation in the German tree, which is always trying to catch up with most of the changes that are happening in the English tree. And I'm also doing work in the English tree. At the moment, I'm helping to write the new ZFS chapter for the handbook. So you and I were actually actively working in this area because the current...
Up until about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, yeah. The actual current chapter is in need of much update. So we're working on this in a separate branch. And this was hopefully soon, hopefully by the time BSD CAN is open, become an official part of the FreeBSD handbook. So there's always stuff to do in different areas. Sometimes it's PR work or fixing typos, making whitespace changes. So all of these changes are necessary and helpful for getting our documentation set updated and keeping it that way. But it's mostly a problem because we are only a few people that are actually documentation committers. So I also did mentoring for a few people because I thought, oh, I had such a good mentoring experience myself, and I want to give this back to other people. So when I saw that someone is very engaged in documentation and wants to make changes that are helpful for other people, and I try to pull this person in and mentor him for a real doc commit bit. And that's my way of actually growing the community and helping out with more people.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what do you do in your day job?
Oh, my day job is another thing that's also BSD related. I'm working in the computer science department. That's the same department where I studied in and wrote that actually rather boring master thesis. And so what I did is I'm doing different projects at the moment. I'm trying to build a cloud computing system for the computer science department so that the staff and the students can run virtual machines on demand via a web page. So I'm currently evaluating OpenStack and OpenNebula, and one of these systems is going to be the new system that we will run, because at the moment we're using the free version ESXi from VMware, and it kind of does what we want to do. We don't want to buy the full license because that would be too much for our use case. But it has some drawbacks. The newer version is something that I don't like too much. So we want to have some open source system, and I probably also want to push into this also a lot of ZFS background, because backing up these virtual machines in case there's something happening is way easier on a ZFS system than on a big storage system that costs thousands of euros.
Yeah, or the VMware solution, which requires a bunch of proprietary software to do snapshots from inside the VM. Or
yeah, exactly. All of this stuff is available for free, or in BSD systems or in open source in general. So why pay a lot of money just for the support that you might get in case there's something wrong?
Well, yeah, and it was interesting today in the Dev Summit we heard that Zen DOM 0 support is almost.
Oh, that's nice.
So
yeah.
that OpenStack will be able to run on top of FreeBSD. As the hypervisor, as well as obviously you use FreeBSD for the storage, but you actually might have it as the option for the hypervisor as well.
Oh, yeah,
Plus,
that's interesting.
If you saw the recent status report, there's work from 2 companies about getting support for Beehive into OpenStack.
Oh, yeah, that would be great, because mostly at the moment it's mostly KVM, and I don't have anything to say against KVM other than it's not BSD developed.
And also that the acronym means something else.
Yeah, it has different meanings, yeah. But so I'm trying to push this. There's a big resistance at the moment, or it's not a big one, but at least there is some resistance because the whole department is using Linux for server critical stuff. So it's kind of difficult to introduce FreeBSD or BSD in general into this environment. So what I do, I took over a Unix course from a professor who's not able to do this anymore because of other time demands on his busy schedule. So I thought, I had this course, visited this course myself when I was a student. Why not take this over and put some BSD stuff in it? And by the time the course was really outdated, it mentioned something like Linux kernel 2.4 or something. So I had to basically rework the whole thing and put some sections on BSD related stuff in there, so that the students not only get to know Linux as a Unix system, but also a bit more wider view of what BSD has to offer. So I have a lecture on ZFS to show them what the features are and how they can use this later in their job when they are going out in the industry. And I'm also having a section on shell scripting and set, grep, and AWK. So these are it's more of a scripting kind of lecture, but from the feedback that I get from the students is that they are very interested in these subjects, not only because they already run a Linux system, but they also want to know more about this and how they can make their lives easier with scripting capabilities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did almost exactly the same stuff.
Yeah. So that's very interesting because you can students get engaged in open source projects in a new kind of way, rather than just meeting them in, say, like a trade show, or trying to get them via Google Summer of Code, which is also a good system. But it's, if you can, teach this to a whole lecture room full of students, at least.
Yes, when you have it's a little easier when you have a captive audience.
Yeah, exactly. And they want to learn all this. And if you can show them these systems side by side, they can make their own decisions and compare them.
Steer them in the right direction.
Just
make BSD use that.
So for the assignments in this class, I'm actually leaving it open what kind of system they are going to use. So the more advanced users can use the system that they already have. Mm-hmm. But I get from most of the students that have never run a Unix before that they are actually in the state of, they can say, oh, I need to either choose Linux or BSD, and this guy is always talking about BSD, so let's try this out. It's
your examples obviously work better in BSD. They've seen more BSD, and obviously the handbook is amazing.
Yeah, right. And that's a good source for students to get their resources from, and don't have to Google every command that they need to use and find out from different sources what this command does. So if they have a handbook with some text around it, examples, and other information that we put in there, it's a single source where you get your information from, and you can try the examples right from the system that you have. So, but I'm usually not pushing any specific system, so I'll hopefully get the students in enough information so that they can say, okay, I have a given problem, and these are the systems that I know, and I think, or I can make the decision to say, okay, this system solves this specific problem the best. So it's not, oh, I only know this one system or this one Unix, and it is the only solution to any problem that I get. So I have a more broader view of what's available in the Unix space.
Exactly. Even I would admit that, FreeBSD isn't always the answer to everything.
Yeah, or a BSD in general.
Yeah. But just having the ability to use the other ones as well, and
exactly know what you are talking about, and can say, or have an educated guess or decision when you can say, okay, I would use this system normally, but in this specific problem that you are having, this other system is what I recommend.
Or when you're in certain situations, you didn't get to pick what OS is on the server, and you have to deal with it anyway. Yeah,
then let's try this.
And I think that was one of the best things, was that FreeBSD seemed to give me this knowledge set of generic stuff that worked everywhere.
Yeah,
Once you learn the concepts, you can do it everywhere. With Linux, oftentimes, even just between distros, it's all different.
Yeah, that's the main problem that the students are struggling with. So I start the lecture usually each semester, or the semester that I'm giving it, by letting the students write on the table or on the blackboard which are the Unix systems that you know, and which are the topics that you are interested in. So after like 10 minutes, I have like 15 Linux distributions there, and maybe FreeBSD, and I let them put marks behind it. So for Debian, I get like 15 users, and for FreeBSD or any BSD in general, like 1 mark. And the topics are very wide, from Git to making changes, writing kernel code, making creating man pages, and all these different areas. So I try to tell them, I cannot teach you all of these topics, but I can show you where you can find the information to teach yourself and find information.
Or even just give you a taste of each of them so that you'll get excited about it and go in.
Exactly. So if you're interested in kernel development or writing kernel modules, then I can give you a short push into the right direction where you can look for information and then find the information hopefully yourself. So learning how to, especially in the Unix world, you cannot know anything, or everything.
You can't everything know.
Yeah. So you have to have the tools and the capabilities and the skills to find your own way and find the own information that you need to get something accomplished.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that's hopefully something that I can bring across, and the students will draw this from this course, rather than, how many command line switches are there for the ls command or something.
Right.
That's not it. That can change over time, but learning how to get the information that you require is, I guess, the most important thing that I can teach to students, and they can apply this basically to all the fields that they are going to work in later on.
Whatever machine they happen to sit down at.
Yeah. So that's also the BSD philosophy, coming from an academic background, to not only have the source available or having it as open as possible so people can play with it and make changes on their own and see what happens, but also that the information is available in one spot, and they don't have to pay a certain amount of license or money to get the handbook from the vendor or something.
Right.
So that's the things that are engaging to me, and that keeps me hanging out with this great crowd in conferences like BSD Can.
Well, and that's the other thing. It's like, being a BSD user, I've been for 15 years almost now, and it was always great. But then I started coming to the conferences, and it just became a whole different level.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you only know these people from the commit messages or from the email addresses and how they interact with each other in the mailing lists, and then you get a certain impression, and you're like, this guy must be like this age, or this guy's probably away like this other guy that I know. But when you meet them in person, then you are like, oh my God, I didn't know that he was so young or so old, or that he's a completely different character than I pictured him just from this conversation.
Or even just from when you interact with people on IRC or mailing list or whatever, usually it's about something, and you don't really get to know the person the same.
Yeah, it's about a topic or a specific thing that they are discussing, and they can, of course, it's sometimes a clash of not only opinions, technical opinions, but also clash of characters. And
oftentimes it's hard to resolve that with text. But in person, it usually can be resolved very easily.
Yeah, it takes away this human interaction.
Yeah.
It's sometimes unavoidable because we are all distributed around the globe.
Yeah.
But especially in these conferences, that's a good way to bring people together and work out certain problems that they couldn't work out in a month or in a
also just
discussion.
To find the common ground and such.
And if you go to these conferences, you will immediately, or that's what I would recommend, go to these conferences for any project you are interested in and get into contact with these people, look how they are, and you will, I guess, in most of the cases, see that all the OpenBSD or the open source projects in general, all the open source projects members are open, helpful, and they want to grow the community, so they try to drag you in some way or another. So yeah, that's the idea of the open source model: grow the community, get the people that are working with the software or with the actual open source project, and get the feedback from the users. It's not just like, developers talking amongst themselves. They also want to know, where are you using our system? What kind of applications are you running?
I hear that a lot when people ask about when BSD Can is kind of a technical conference, but half of the target audience is the users, and not just sysadmins, but even just everyday users, because the developers need to know what to develop next or what needs improvement. And
exactly. Or sometimes, I'm having this application problem with like tens of millions of users, and that's something that it's difficult to replicate in a developer environment because you don't have that many users.
There's Olivier, who's one of the other people here, and we were talking, and he wanted the installer to have a certain feature that it didn't have, and last night it grew that feature.
Yeah, suddenly out of thin air.
I had a problem with Beehive last year in Malta, where when you tried to create a ZFS pool in the virtual machine, something it did caused an assertion and crashed Beehive.
Oh.
And 45 minutes later, I was emailed a patch that fixed it.
Yeah, there can be a lot of things been done that would normally take weeks normally, but if you can
months, or just would never have happened. We wanted OpenBSD to be able to boot in Beehive, so I dragged an OpenBSD developer and a Beehive developer and stuck them in a corner. I came back 6 hours later and they were still there.
Make them fight it out. Yeah.
And a couple of days later, all of a sudden we have OpenBSD booting in Beehive.
Yeah, that's really great, because normally it's different projects, different people, different time zones, and when they are in the same place, they can sit down in one space and then work the thing out amongst themselves, and then commit the code, and everyone is happy afterwards.
And the other thing is, everybody's busy. Like, there's no one here that has a lot of free time.
Sure, it's
and
weekend warriors sometimes.
And they're giving away so much of their time for the project, but coming to these events, I'm not the only person that feels this way, but a lot of people tell me this, is that coming to these events and getting to talk to the people recharges their BSD battery.
Oh yeah,
you just get excited about it again, and you get that much more work done for the months after the conference.
That's really important. Yeah, because the battery can really deplete fast. Because
especially when you're only working online, you feel like you're alone often.
Yeah, am I the only one working on this? Or I saw a quote once from the one who wrote the Narnia books, and he said the way to tell a friend is like, oh, I never thought that I thought that I was the only one, and you must be my friend probably.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why there is a good way when people come together at a conference or a similar meetup to work on specific things and see, oh, he's having the same problem that I have, and maybe he found a solution already. So I don't have to look for a solution myself.
He has that one bit of insight that'll inspire me to find the solution, or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful.
Yeah, so the conferences are definitely a very important thing.
Yeah, sometimes it's the only thing that people are looking forward to in the year, so they plan their holidays accordingly to where the conferences are scheduled.
Exactly. Well, is there anything else you want to talk about?
Yes, we've been talking a lot about, open source projects and, how open they are and accessible, but there's also another side to it. So if there are people who, there are certain things that cannot be discussed in public because it would, cause trouble in certain ways. So there are, hidden mailing lists or mailing lists that are not publicly available, where people talk certain things that might be critical. So, for example, there is one thing when people start to get annoying and get on other people's nerves or holding them up from actual doing the work. And then things need to be decided, what should we do with these people? Should we, how should we handle this situation? And such a situation has arisen in the few months or in the last few months, like where people were, sending excessive patches for specific, chapters or specific areas, and then people would usually come together and say, okay, what should we do with this guy? And I'm happy, and I'm very, very happy that it worked out. We had a discussion weeks back about a certain person named Allan, who is excessively committing, or hopefully trying to commit soon, the actual changes to a certain tree called the documentation tree. And I got the documentation folks together and the documentation engineering team, and they agreed that it would be the best way to deal with this person by giving him a documentation commit bit. So I'm here to say, welcome, Allan, to the documentation team. I have 3 mentors for you: Warren Block, Ethan Adler, and myself. Okay. Because time zone differences make this not sometimes an easy project or a process. So we 3 agreed that we will mentor you for everything that you need to know to become a full documentation committer within the FreeBSD project. And we can get this process started right away. We just have to activate you as a committer, and then you can submit patches to your mentors and become, in a few months, hopefully, or sooner, a full documentation committer to the FreeBSD project.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, welcome.
Okay.
Okay, next up, we're going to be getting to our weekly news roundup. But quickly before that, of course, we want to mention this week's sponsor, of course, IX Systems. And this week, it looks like they have a new video they've published talking about FreeNAS 9.2.1.5, an overview of shares. Have you had a chance to take a look at that, Allan?
No. Basically, it sounds like it walks you through how to set up your the different types of shares, including the Apple file protocol, NFS, CIFS for Windows, and even Time Machine.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, of course, they have the handy little bookmarks and the hit the more button there, so you can jump ahead to the type of share you're interested in. But that's pretty neat. Keep up the good work, guys, who are producing
nice
those.
Logo too.
Yeah, definitely. But of course, in addition to making awesome videos like this, which are good tutorials on how to use FreeNAS, IX Systems, of course, is the corporate sponsor behind FreeNAS, behind PCBSD, and many other things in the FreeBSD community. Odds are, if you've been to a conference, a Linux conference anywhere in North America, you've probably seen Drew or other IX folks there. Seems like they always have a booth and are handing out awesome FreeBSD and IX Systems swag.
Plus PCBSD CDs.
Definitely. Yeah, we always try and get one of those in everyone's hand. But yeah, they're definitely a driving force in the community. And we, of course, want to mention the URL, ixsystems.com/BSD Now. And go ahead and let them know that we sent you there. And anything else you want to add, Allan?
If you were watching live this week, you saw us interview Josh Fetzel about some of the, the lengths they went to with their white glove support to help a customer. If you're watching the recorded version, you'll see that that'll be a couple episodes from now. But basically involved Josh on Memorial Day weekend, driving to the office, loading up his trucks with 100 terabytes of storage, and then driving 6 hours to the customer's location to rescue their stuff and have everything back up and running before the Memorial Day weekend was over and business went back to usual.
There's not going to be many vendors out there that would be willing to do something like that, but man.
Or just that would have people like Josh on staff. There's just not anyone else that
could even get there and diagnose it,
that would know, the inner workings of ZFS to make that all happen.
But again, if you haven't seen that, if you weren't watching live, that's upcoming. You'll want to check that out. That was a fascinating story. Josh is good at this.
Yeah, it was a great interview, and he answered a bunch of other questions, and it's all the information you need to know, and we brought it to you.
Cool. Of course, we want to mention, IX Systems produces a lot of stuff. In addition to the white glove support, they make everything from small FreeNAS minis to the mega machines we've shown you pictures of in past episodes. So 80 cores and however many, gazillion terabytes.
776 terabytes in the one we looked at the other week.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. But they can do that. And the best part is they're not just going to pull something off the shelf. They're going to talk to you. Their salespeople actually know what they're talking about. And when you tell them this is the kind of rig I want set up, they can figure out what's going to work best in that scenario for you. Of course, powered by the latest Intel processors and battle tested before it even hits your server rack.
They make sure they test this stuff for a couple of days before they ship it to you, because if it was going to fail, it's going to be then. And they'd rather it happen while they're there and they can fix it. And rather than you get it there, you get it all hooked up and then it doesn't work. It's like, well, that's disappointing. So I just pulled up a picture of the TerraFiler. This is their dual head system with 3 giant chassis full of disks, and it gives you 4 chassis with 45 disks each. Plus, they put a bunch of disks in each of the 2 heads, giving them total 194 4-terabyte drives. And
dang.
and just for your information, they built this for fun. They just built this one because they wanted to see how much, and mostly it is to record a video of their anti-vibration rack technology.
Sure. Well, wasn't this originally testing? They talked about how somebody was getting poorer performance because there was like a bus. It was buses running in front of the building or something, creating vibration.
Well, that's what started the. So Brett and Greg with D-Trace managed to discover that vibrations were slowing down the hard drives. So we did the video where he yelled at the hard drives, and so when IX heard about this anti-vibration technology in a rack, they're like, all right, well, let's see if we set up our band in front of the rack. Does all that vibration hurt the performance of our hard drives? And so we look forward to seeing that video when it comes out.
That is awesome. Well, cool. Again, that URL, ixsystems.com/BSD Now. Let them know that we sent you. We would appreciate that, of course. And while you're there, fill out the form and download their free handy guide on what you need to know before you purchase a server for open source, what to expect and look for in a vendor. Okay, well, next up, we're going to get right into the news roundup. So first up this week, we got getting to know your port manager. And this week is Steve Willis. So what's up with Steve?
Yeah, Steve Wills. He just joined the port.
Or excuse me, Wills.
He just joined the port manager team. We brought you that news like 1 or 2 weeks ago. And so obviously he had to do an interview to answer all the questions that everybody else in the port manager team had already had to answer. Yes, he's Steve Wills. His name on IRC is S. Wills, which is just his first letter of his name and then his last name. He's from the U.S. and he works as a sysadmin. He doesn't actually
does a lot of Ruby ports.
He doesn't have a blog, but he does Twitter. You know, he was inspired to use FreeBSD just because of how simple it is but powerful and how much he could learn about it. But he doesn't remember who the first person from FreeBSD he met was because it was so long ago. Then this is his mentor, and yes, his most embarrassing moment on FreeBSD was trying to migrate the default version of Ruby in the ports tree from 1.8 to 1.9 and breaking things horribly and having to undo it all.
Oops.
Yes.
And interestingly, he used to work for Red Hat too. That's an interesting tidbit.
Yep.
But, we're glad to have you in the FreeBSD project, Steve.
And then, what is your role in your circle of friends, the FreeBSD user? Yep. And he says the thing that keeps him motivated about FreeBSD is the new users and the new committers and just watching the community grow.
Okay, well, next up in the roundup, we got a BSD Talk has released episode 242. Yep. And it's an interesting one. They're interviewing Chris Buechler from pfSense. So you'll want to go check that out. Some of the topics they touched on included the, of course, Heartbleed vulnerability, how it affected pfSense. You know, a little bit of chatter about how people usually leave their firewalls unpatched for a long time or even forget they are there. Bad. Need to fix that. Changes between major versions, the upgrade process, upcoming features in their 10-based version of pfSense, you know, backporting drivers, and of course, security fixes. So they also touch on some recent concerns in the pfSense community about their license change and that they may be going commercial and closing the source. So you'll need to tune in, go listen to that to find out what all their future plans are for all that.
That should help.
So how about that for a teaser?
You create some conspiracy so that people watch the competing podcast.
Like, what is this? I need to go click that now to see what's going on.
But yes, a couple more interviews that Will got at BSDCan, so those are always good. He does a good job.
Cool. And then next up, we have something similar to one of the news articles we did earlier, but turning an old PC hardware into a killer home server in this case. Yeah. So article's actually up there on PC World talking about turning your old system laying around to a killer home server with FreeNAS on it, of course.
Yes, it's always interesting to see more like mainstream media type stuff actually covering BSD, and so that's why we link it in here.
Yeah. So, of course, the article mentions if you have old hardware lying around doing nothing but collecting dust, well, let's find some way to repurpose it into a modern file server with FreeNAS and ZFS. The article is going to go through a lot of the process of setting up the NAS, gives a little history behind the project, highlights some of the different protocols FreeNAS use. And, of course, most of our users are already familiar with this stuff. It is, of course, on PC World, but it's really good, like Allan said, to see it hitting some of the more mainstream news sites.
And I've often told people that it's FreeNAS and pfSense are kind of the gateway drug that get people introduced to BSD and get used to even if they're a Windows shop, all of a sudden they'll have some FreeNAS boxes backing their VMware or as their file server, whatever, and then pfSense for the firewall, and then all of a sudden it becomes accepted to have BSD, and then. Or just, users, they use FreeNAS and they love it. And they're like, well, why don't I try PCBSD on my laptop and see how that goes or whatever.
It's a broad family. There's a lot of other things you can run all BSD here.
Yeah, I think those two projects in particular do a good job of kind of getting people introduced to it, even when they're not even necessarily interested in Unix at all.
Cool. So next up, a kind of funny article here about unloading the VAX install CD for the NetBSD folks. So we'll of course have a link to the article here, but after a discussion on the VAX mailing list, something very important came to the attention of the developers. Oh my gosh, you can't boot NetBSD on a VAX box with 16 megabytes of RAM from the CD. Stop it. We should let PC World know about this one, man. This is crazy. Anyway, the blog post goes through the developer's adventure in trying to fix that through emulation and stripping various things out of the kernel to make it smaller and run in a 16 megabyte system. And I think the last time I had a system with 16 megs was like 100 megahertz Pentium back in the I don't even know what it was back
my 486 that was only 66 megahertz had a ridiculously huge 32 megabytes of RAM.
That's
just crazy amount of RAM. So
I think our 486 was still 4 megabytes.
Well, even most people's like first Pentium 90s only had 8 megabytes. And it was my cousin worked at a bank and it was his old machine, so it was just like ridiculously done up with like a pair of SCSI hard drives and stuff. Nobody had 2 hard drives at that time. I've actually never had a system with only 16 megabytes of RAM.
Oh no, I remember our first one was like 4 megs, and we bought that because then you could actually plug a CD-ROM drive into it and use the encyclopedia that came on CD, and that was so mind-blowing.
With mine, I actually...
Like, it all fits on this one disk.
I had an external CD-ROM drive that was connected by a SCSI, and so it was huge, and it was 1.6x. So it could read the CD, a CD is like 80 minutes, and it could read it in 1.6 times less than 80 minutes.
Nice.
and it, instead of having the regular drawer, it had these caddies. So like it looked almost like a jewel case, but it had a big metal slider on the bottom.
You had to put them in
and
there.
There's 2 of them, and you can put them in like they were tape cassettes or something. It was a ridiculous setup.
Someday I have to explain to my kids what all this stuff is. They don't even know what a VHS was at this point.
I kept that old 486. It's still in my basement, so
nice. Well, spoilers, but in the end of the blog post, he did get it working. So now the other 3 VAX users who are still running NetBSD can do that on their systems with 16 megabytes of RAM. So props for getting that working. That's pretty
They should
wild.
Also check out eBay and get more RAM. Although I don't have any idea what kind of RAM a VAX took. So.
I don't even know.
Yeah.
No clue.
Ridiculous.
Cool. Well, we'll be back in just a moment with our weekly feedback and question segment. We're back with our feedback and questions for the week. So we start this week with Thomas asking about disk speeds.
Yes, he says EHLO BSD Now TV, which is the way to do enhanced
+1 for that, by the way.
Mail protocol. Anyway, he says he's been using Arch Linux for about 7 years. In the past 3 years, been trying to harden it with using GR security impacts and all that kind of stuff. But he says in the past 6 months, he pulled his head out of the sand and started rebuilding the whole thing from binutils to get Firefox fully hardened with Pi something. Anyway, he said that was a pain, and they decided to switch to OpenBSD. And he says that he loves OpenBSD more and more every day. He says his ThinkPad X230 and his 2 VPSs now run OpenBSD 5.5 stable. One of the things that surprised him about OpenBSD is that it actually is, or can be used as a desktop OS. It is a killer server OS, but almost all the OpenBSD devs run it on their laptop as well, so it's actually well suited as a desktop. They have ACPI, Intel Graphics, X11, wireless, and so on, all working. And then he's like, "Holy cow! PF really does make IP tables look like junk." And I couldn't agree more. IP tables is the worst thing ever. It's like, who decided on that syntax? It's not even a syntax. It's just gibberish, just strings of gibberish. So he says he's got one question/problem. He's getting crazy slow disk speeds. He says the max speeds he's seen with IOStat was peaking at about 180 megabytes a second. Full disk AES 256 encryption on Linux gets 350 megabytes a second. I'm not sure what. He has an SSD. Okay. He says there's some default on security settings which limit disk I/O or number of threads or something like that, which is slowing it down. Or is it just FFS is just crazy slow? Well, on OpenBSD, they do have everything giant locked. The multi-processor support is kind of, because there are security concerns about the order things are done and so on, they force everything to be under a single lock. So there is less performance on multi-core systems because of that. But I guess he's saying he's sometimes seeing less than 200 megabytes a second. I don't know what OpenBSD's like AHCI disk stack is actually like performance-wise.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head either.
But some of those numbers he could have been getting from Linux probably could have just been, unsafe write cache and stuff like that. So it kind of depends. This particular question, I'm guessing we'll get some feedback from OpenBSD people that will explain why your disk is slow. I'm not an OpenBSD expert, so I don't actually know what problem you're having. Although you could make some changes to some of your mount flags here, like turning. Oh, you do have no A time on some of the stuff, but on some of the other ones, you have it almost in there, Mike. Yeah, I don't know exactly what your speed difference is, but I do know that FFS and UFS are not slow, so those are not the problem. So
Sure.
I guess one thing to look is when you're writing and it's not going as fast as you would like, what does the CPU usage look like? And if you're using up all your CPU, that's probably where the problem lies.
Okay. So I think you pretty much answered that one there. Well, hopefully some OpenBSD folks will write in, give us some more details
some tips on what you can
take a look at.
So Reynold writes in and wonders about system stats, and he's he's been using Linux for 12 years, and he's trying out FreeBSD, and he's having some trouble getting certain bits of information because there's no /proc where you can dig into this stuff. So I replied to this earlier, but obviously the top tool in FreeBSD is much more useful. It actually, you can find out stuff like the memory usage of each process much more easily. And there is a /proc you can mount. It's called procfs. It's off by default, but you can do that.
You can even mount the Linux version of procfs.
And there's also
that works for the most part too.
linprocfs, which provides that as well. But he said he managed to get most of the information he wanted out of the tool called procstat, which is in FreeBSD. But I also introduced him to a couple other tools he could use, like, depending what he's at. VMstat, sysstat, gstat for disk stuff, iostat, obviously, for disk stuff. But mostly, almost everything you want is in top. It's actually top on FreeBSD is very powerful. It's much closer to one of the alternatives like htop or something on Linux. Including top -m/IO will actually make top show you disk IO instead. So you can find out which process is using up all your disk space instead of all your CPU and RAM. Or not disk space, but disk IO.
Yeah. Cool. Well, hopefully answered that fully for him.
But basically, you can get...
there's no lack of tools on BSD to do this.
For me, I'm so used to the BSD tools. Every time I go to a Linux machine, I'm basically in the same position he is. I'm like, I don't know what tools to get the information I need.
Okay. Well, next up, question from Boston asking about what comes with BSD. And we replied to him offline, but we want to show this to you guys as well. So he says, "Hi, I'm watching your show from day one, and even sometimes topics are over his head." He said he loves the show and thinks it's a good one, that you're bringing a lot to the BSD community. So thank you. He says, "I hope you'll answer my question. It's really a basic one. As I understand, PCBSD has all the tools and software pre-installed. So after the clean installation of PCBSD, you can start working, write a document, make an email, edit pictures, etc. Does it also include some server applications such as FTP, email, Apache, etc.? So as I answered him earlier, yes, it does. We have a full package and repo set up. So anything that you want, you can pretty much just package install it, or go to the App Cafe and install.
It doesn't automatically install a web server because you wouldn't want that, but it's
on a desktop.
It's one command and 10 seconds later, and you have the web server.
Yeah, it's really quite simple. So you can do it all graphically, or then say install it into a jail, etc. But all that stuff's available. Everything from Postfix to Nginx to Apache, PHP, you name it, it's probably in there.
Yeah. So he's mentioned FreeBSD. He's like, so it comes with no packages by default. So what do you actually get in the base system? And you do get all the basic tools, like you can, all the ones we just talked about, like top, procstat, VMstat, sysstat, gstat, all the stuff to find out what's going on, and all the stuff you need, like compilers and linkers and everything to actually build software. It just doesn't provide programs made by other people to do other things, right? So if you need a web server, you just install it. It's not that hard. But they don't include a web server by default because not everybody needs a web server. But basically, when it's a tool that almost everybody's going to need, like, there's NVI, so you can edit text files. You got your compiler and your linker and stuff, debugging tools.
Basic shells.
Basically everything you need. But you're probably always going to end up installing some third-party stuff to give you extra tools. So all your favorite tools are probably available. They're just optional.
Okay. Well, next up, we have a question from Paul as a follow-up about file system corruption.
Yeah, so he wrote in last week with he had an OpenStack system that was running, and then somehow the disk got very corrupted. So he provided some more details to us about what happened. So it looks like he's got his QCow image here, and then he mounted it up, and when he runs FSCK on it, it seems to run fine, and when he runs it a second time, it on /USR, it finds a lot of problems. you might, yeah, he's got a whole bunch here with there's like some negative numbers that just looks really bad. I might have recommended when you're doing it to tell it no when it asks if it wants to use the journal. The journal,
force it to rescan.
Yeah, so basically the journal is a list of what changed recently, and so it makes it so that if the power goes out on the system's up or whatever, and it reboots, you don't have a lot of problems. So it doesn't take hours to FSCK the whole drive, but at the same time, it allows you to get it back up quickly. But if you need to scan the whole drive because of a problem, you definitely want to say no to the journal and let it scan the whole
full thing. Yeah. Cool. And of course, we'll post that if anybody wants to look at all the syntax and errors you got, and if you have any other tidbits or tricks, we can try and pass that along. So next question is from John, and the title was ZFS. So my guess is he wants to talk about ZFS. So he says, "Hi guys, sorry for another what should I do with my ZFS setup question, but here it is. What should I do with my ZFS setup?" So his current setup is 4 2TB Seagate drives with 60GB SSD L2 ARC. The 4 2TB drives are all in one mirrored pool, so 3.8 terabyte usable. He's reaching about his 80% limit. His wife takes thousands of kids' photos a week, it feels like. The rest is media files. Says he only has enough money to buy 2 4TB Western Digital Red drives, so what should I do with them? So what would you recommend in this case, Allan?
So he has a couple of options. So by the sounds of the way he has the pool now is 2 sets of mirrors. So 2 2TB disks and then 2 more 2TB disks, and it stripes across them. So one of his options is to add to a third mirror set, and they because they're separate VDEVs, they don't have to be the same size. The only problem you'll have at that point is that your third mirror with the 4 terabytes will be 100% empty or 0% full, and your other 2 will be 80% full. So ZFS, when it's writing data, is going to bias the data towards the new one to try to make all 3 VDEVs get to 90% at the same time, or 100% at the same time anyway. So that means it's going to be write a lot more of the data to the new drive, and so your performance isn't going to be as good, right? Instead of reading and writing to all 3 sets of drives evenly, it's going to bias towards the empty one, and that's called an unbalanced LUN. And basically, it's just going to hurt performance. But because those are mirrored, you're still going to have all your redundancy. So that's the easiest option, and that just works. He also talked about replacing individual out of his existing 2 mirrors. If he just swapped out one of each of the drives with the 4 terabyte drive or something, and what that would do, that probably wouldn't make so much sense. One option would be to, one at a time, replace both disks in one of the mirror sets with the 4 terabyte drives. And when that was done, you would now have one mirror set that's 4 terabytes and has 2 terabytes free, and a second mirror set that was almost full. And then you would add the 2 old drives as the third VDEV. And now you'd have 2 VDEVs that both had 2 terabytes of free space, and then one that was almost full. And that way, when you do when you're writing to it, you're going to be able to get the performance of at least 2 sets of disks instead of just one.
Sure.
And then in the future, you could do that again if you have enough room in the chassis to hold all the drives, with 2 more 2 terabyte drives to replace the old 2, the remaining set of 2, and grow that one, and then add those 2 drives back, and that would give you a much more even balance. But if you're not that worried about performance, then you can just add the 2 new disks to the end of the array, and it'll be happy.
Sure. Cool. Okay. Well, good answer on that one there, Allan. So, of course, as we close, all the tutorials we've done are going to be posted in their entirety at bsdnow.tv. So go check that out. Not just this week's, but there may be a past one, something that'll interest you as well. Send your questions, comments, show ideas, or topics, or stories you want to see mentioned on the show to feedback@bsdnow.tv. Only send it there. We don't monitor other social media. If you want to come on over for an interview or you have a tutorial you'd like to see, let us know as well. We're always looking to get new stuff on the show. We also want to mention a little bit of housekeeping here. The DNS crypt tutorial has been updated to reflect some of the newer versions there.
The DNS crypt was updated to 1.4. which now, instead of only supporting OpenDNS, it comes with a CSV file full of a bunch of different servers you can choose to use. So yeah, after the tutorial, there were some problems. Some things I didn't like about the way the port was done, especially, a bunch of the configuration parameters you couldn't just do as nice rc.conf variables. So I wrote up a patch for the port, and that was accepted and so I updated it to the latest version and introduced a bunch of rc.conf variables to control, the user it does for PridgeSep and the path to that CSV file and all that kind of fun stuff.
Cool. Okay, there was also some more serious OpenSSL security problems that were announced and, of course, patched.
So we have the links for NetBSD, FreeBSD, and OpenBSD, and Dragonfly as well. If you upgrade 3.8.1 has the patches.
Man, this is going to be the year of OpenSSL. I mean, we've had plenty of patches in the past for other things. But
especially if they get to that audit starts up and they start finding more and more of the problems. At least this time it won't be because they won't be finding it because someone's exploiting it. But yeah, I
mean it's a good thing. Sure, it's annoying to have to patch, but rather that than live in ignorance and not know people are getting into your stuff. So of course, we will mention as usual, we do this show live. So if you'd like to watch how we make the show, that airs 2 p.m. Eastern, 1800 UTC on Wednesdays. So join us for the live show, which is a lot of fun.
Interviews early that way. Like this week we interviewed Josh Betzel, but that won't come out for a couple weeks.
Cool. Yeah. There's a special shout out. You want to mention this here?
I have no idea what this is. But yes, there's a special shout out to Acthet on Freenode, who apparently always spams Cowsay turkeys in the FreeBSD chat room. And apparently that's a good thing. I don't know.
Yes. Okay. Well, cool. Well, join us again next week. We'll look forward to having you guys with us on the next show.
All right. See you next week.